What do you think you're doing? Get away from that trash! Come back here right now! Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get away from that trash! Come back here right now! Hey, what do you think you're doing? Get away from that trash! Come back here right now!
Casting tired yellow light over cracked concrete and scattered debris. People passed by the entrance without a glance. Their footsteps hurried, their attention fixed on phones, conversations, or the simple urgency of getting home before the evening chill deepened. But the box was not empty. Inside, pressed tightly against one another, a mother cat curved her thin body around 5 tiny kittens. Her ribs showed through her matted fur, rising and falling in quick, uneven breaths. The kittens were so small they barely seemed real, fragile shapes of trembling life, their eyes still sealed shut, their cries weak and uncertain. Just hours earlier, the world had felt different. The porch had been warm, washed in the gentle sunlight of late afternoon. The mother cat had chosen that quiet corner carefully, tucked behind an old chair, shielded from wind, close to the comforting scent of human presence. It had seemed safe, still, a place where danger might hesitate. She had believed in the simple, instinctive way animals do that she had finally found somewhere her babies could live. Then came the voice, sharp, irritated, cutting through the peace like shattered glass. Oh, for heaven's sake, not again. Heavy footsteps followed. The sudden shadow, the smell of anger, a tense, restless energy that made the mother cat's ears flatten instantly. She had lifted her head, eyes wide, body stiff, unsure whether to flee or stay. The woman's face twisted with disgust. Filthy strays, she muttered. The mother cat tried to make herself smaller, curling tighter around her kittens, her heart pounding wildly. The babies stirred beneath her, sensing fear without understanding it. There was no warning. Hands reached down, fast, rough, unyielding. The mother cat hissed, a thin, desperate sound, not of aggression but terror. She tried to scramble away, but there was nowhere to go. The kittens were lifted with careless fingers, their tiny bodies dangling helplessly. One of them let out a faint, broken squeak. "Stop that noise," the woman snapped. A box appeared, old, crumpled, smelling of dust and damp paper. The kittens were dropped inside, tumbling softly against one another. The mother cat leaped forward, frantic, but the hands were quicker. She was shoved in after them. Darkness closed. The lid folded. The world became sound and motion, the violent jolt of being carried, the dizzying sway, the suffocating absence of light. The kittens cried weakly. The mother cat clawed at the cardboard, panic exploding through her body, but the walls held firm. Then came the final movement, a careless swing, a sudden drop, impact. Pain shot through her limbs as the box hit the ground near the trash bins, skidding slightly before coming to rest against a torn garbage bag. Something wet seeped through the cardboard. The smell was sharp and sour. "She's just a stray." The woman's voice drifted away, already distant, already indifferent. "They always find somewhere." Footsteps retreated. A door slammed. Silence reclaimed the alley. Inside the box, the kittens whimpered, their tiny cries fading into exhausted, fragile sounds. The mother cat forced herself upright despite the ache in her body. Instinct took over where strength failed. She pulled the kittens close, licking them gently, desperately, trying to warm them, soothe them, convince them, and perhaps herself, that safety had not vanished entirely. But the cold crept in. The dampness spread. Time passed in slow, merciless minutes. The kittens grew quieter. The mother cat's breathing became heavier, weaker. Hunger gnawed at her, a deep, relentless emptiness. Yet she did not move away from her babies. She could not. Every shiver of their tiny bodies sent a fresh wave of urgency through her fading strength. Finally, summoning what little energy remained, she lifted her head and cried. It was not loud, not strong, not the commanding call of a healthy animal. It was thin, trembling, almost swallowed by the vast indifference of the evening, but it carried through the narrow alley, past the flickering street lamp, into the quiet street beyond. And this time, someone heard. Ethan almost didn't stop. The alley was a place most people avoided, especially after sunset. It smelled of damp concrete and old rain, of things discarded and forgotten. He usually walked faster when passing it, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes forward, mind elsewhere. It had been a long day, the kind that left a dull pressure behind his eyes and a heaviness in his chest he couldn't quite explain. His headphones rested around his neck, silent. The battery had died hours ago, but he hadn't bothered to remove them. The quiet suited his mood. He stepped past the mouth of the alley. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he nearly mistook it for the wind scraping against cardboard. But it came again, thin, fragile, trembling. A cry. Ethan slowed. He turned his head slightly, uncertain. The street was otherwise calm, cars gliding by in the distance, the muted hum of evening life continuing without interruption. For a moment he hesitated, caught between curiosity and exhaustion. The sound came again, weaker this time. Something in it, something raw, strained, desperate, tugged at him in a way he couldn't ignore. With a quiet sigh, Ethan stepped into the alley. The air felt colder there, shadows stretching long and uneven beneath the flickering street lamp. His shoes crunched softly against bits of gravel and scattered litter. He moved slowly, listening, his heartbeat beginning to quicken for reasons he didn't fully understand. "There you are," he murmured under his breath. Near the trash bins he spotted the box. It was damp, slightly collapsed along one side as though whatever was inside had shifted or struggled. Ethan frowned, approaching carefully. Another faint sound emerged. Not one cry now, but several, overlapping, barely audible. His stomach tightened. He crouched. For a brief second, his hand hovered over the box, hesitation flickering through him. People abandoned things all the time. Sometimes animals, sometimes worse. But the soft whimpering erased doubt. Ethan pulled back the loose flap and froze. Oh. 5 tiny kittens lay huddled together, their bodies trembling weakly, their fur still thin and delicate. Their eyes were eyelids shut, their movements slow and uncoordinated. One barely stirred at all. Curled protectively around them was the mother cat. She lifted her head with visible effort, her dull, exhausted eyes locking onto Ethan's face. There was no hiss, no attempt to flee. Only a silent, aching plea that hit him harder than any display of fear could have. For a moment, Ethan simply stared. The world seemed to narrow. The alley, the cold air, the distant traffic all fading into the background. All he could see were those tiny, fragile lives pressed against one another, clinging to warmth that was rapidly disappearing. Oh no, 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 without thinking. He shrugged off his jacket. The evening chill bit instantly at his skin, but he barely noticed. Gently, carefully, he slid his hands beneath the trembling family. The mother cat flinched slightly, her body tense, yet she did not resist. The kittens made small, weak sounds as they were lifted. "It's okay," Ethan whispered, his voice softer than he had used in years. "I've got you. You're okay." He wrapped the jacket around them, creating a small cocoon of warmth. The kittens quieted almost immediately, their tiny bodies pressing instinctively into the fabric. The mother cat's rigid posture softened, just slightly, her breathing still fast but less frantic. Ethan stood, holding them close to his chest. His heart pounded. His mind raced. He had never taken care of animals before. Never planned to. His apartment was small, barely enough space for himself. His life felt fragile enough without adding responsibility for 6 living creatures. But as he looked down at the bundled shapes in his arms, doubt felt impossibly distant. "Yeah," he muttered quietly, adjusting his grip. "Like I was really going to leave you here." The walk home felt different. Every step was careful, measured. Every passing car, every gust of wind suddenly mattered. He shielded the bundle instinctively, as though protecting something infinitely precious. Inside the jacket, faint movement continued. Tiny paws, soft shifting, fragile breaths. Life. By the time Ethan reached his apartment, anxiety had fully taken hold. Okay, think," he murmured, nudging the door open with his foot. The next hour dissolved into chaos. Warm towels pulled from drawers. A cardboard box transformed into a makeshift bed. Frantic searches on his phone. Newborn kittens care, what to feed stray cat, how to keep kittens warm. Milk, heat, safety. The mother cat watched everything with wary, exhausted eyes, too weak to move much but alert enough to track Ethan's every motion. The kittens lay nestled together, wrapped in warmth, their cries now softer, steadier. Long after midnight, Ethan sat beside them on the floor. He should have been asleep. He should have been overwhelmed. Instead, he found himself listening to the faint, rhythmic sound of tiny breathing. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the silence no longer felt empty. The apartment began to change in ways Ethan never expected. At first it was subtle, almost unnoticeable. A faint rustling sound in the mornings. Tiny, uneven squeaks breaking the silence at odd hours. The soft padding of paws where once there had been only stillness. Then, slowly, life took over every corner. The kittens grew with astonishing speed, as though determined to reclaim the me they had nearly lost. Their once fragile bodies became rounder, stronger. Their eyes opened to the world, curious, bright, endlessly searching. What had once been a quiet, orderly apartment transformed into a playground of clumsy adventures. They stumbled more than they walked. They tumbled more than they ran. Ethan would wake to find one kitten bravely scaling the side of the couch, another hopelessly tangled in the curtain, two others engaged in dramatic battles with invisible enemies only they could see. Their tiny energy seemed infinite, their enthusiasm contagious. For the first time in years, laughter filled the room. Real laughter. Sudden, unguarded, surprising even to Ethan himself. Hey, that's my sock," he would protest gently, watching a tiny furball drag his clothing triumphantly across the floor. The mother cat changed too. The fearful tension that once lived in her body slowly faded, replaced by a quiet, cautious trust. Her movements grew more confident. Her eyes, once dull and heavy with exhaustion, regained their sharp, gentle glow. And she followed Ethan everywhere. From the kitchen to the bedroom, from the desk to the door, a silent, graceful shadow with soft paws and watchful eyes. She would sit nearby as he worked, curled neatly beside his chair, her presence steady and strangely comforting. Sometimes Ethan would look down and find her already watching him, not with fear, but with something that felt unmistakably like gratitude. "You're a strange one," he murmured one evening, scratching gently behind her ears. She leaned into his hand. It was a small gesture, but it warmed something deep inside him. Days began to feel different. Ethan noticed it gradually, like a shift in the air. Mornings no longer dragged him reluctantly from bed. Evenings no longer stretched endlessly with that familiar, aching quiet. There was always movement now, always sound, always someone waiting for him. Tiny paws raced to greet him at the door. Soft meows echoed through the hallway. The apartment no longer felt like a place he simply lived in. It felt alive. One afternoon, sunlight poured through the window, spilling across the floor in warm golden patches. The kittens sprawled lazily in the light, their earlier chaos replaced by sleepy contentment. Ethan sat on the couch, laptop forgotten beside him, simply watching them. It struck him then. The silence he once feared had vanished, replaced by warmth, by presence, by connection. He didn't feel alone anymore. A sharp knock at the door shattered the calm. Ethan stiffened slightly. Visitors were rare, very rare. He stood, puzzled, moving toward the door as the mother cat rose smoothly from her resting place. The kittens stirred, ears twitching, their attention instantly captured by the unfamiliar sound. Another knock. Ethan opened the door. Mrs. Alder stood there. His elderly neighbor was known throughout the building for her stern expression, clipped tone, and unwavering intolerance for noise, clutter, or inconvenience. Ethan had exchanged only a handful of words with her in the past, each interaction brief and slightly uncomfortable. Her gaze swept past him, into the apartment, directly onto the kittens. For a moment, her face remained unreadable. Then something unexpected happened. A tiny kitten waddled forward, its steps uncertain why. Determined. It paused near the doorway, tilting its head upward with innocent curiosity. Mrs. Alder blinked. Oh my. The hardness in her expression cracked, just slightly. "Well," she murmured, her voice suddenly softer, "so that's where all the commotion has been coming from." Ethan shifted awkwardly. "I'm sorry if they've been..." But Mrs. Alder had already stepped inside. slowly, carefully, as though entering a different world. The kitten approached her without hesitation. Moments later, Ethan watched in disbelief as the stern, intimidating woman lowered herself onto the floor and laughed. A quiet, surprised, utterly genuine laugh as the tiny creature clumsily attempted to climb her sleeve. "Well, aren't you something?" she whispered. The apartment grew warmer in that moment, not from sunlight, but from something far rarer, something human, something healing. Months passed, and the alley where it had all begun slowly transformed in ways that felt almost magical. Ethan would sometimes walk past, glancing at the rows of trash bins, expecting the usual emptiness, the lingering smell of damp cardboard and decay. But now, something different caught his eye. Near the corner where the bins leaned unevenly, a small wooden shelter had been placed. It was modest, nothing elaborate, but it was sturdy, painted a soft beige, with a little slanted roof, and a blanket peeking from the entrance. It looked out of place against the gray, worn concrete, yet somehow it belonged. Ethan approached it cautiously one evening, carrying a bag of food. His heart swelled as he noticed a pair of bright eyes watching from the shadows. The mother cat. She had returned, as if to check on the world she had almost lost. Her once thin, matted fur had grown glossy and healthy. She paused at the edge of the shelter, ears flicking, tail twitching lightly, before stepping inside. She sniffed the blankets, inspecting the tiny sanctuary. Then, as if satisfied, she curled into a ball and let out a low, contented purr. The kittens, now older and full of energy, had grown into sleek, lively cats with playful personalities that filled the apartment and even spilled beyond it. Each had found a home. Some with Ethan himself, some with friends and neighbors who had fallen in love during visits. Though they no longer lived under his roof, Ethan felt their presence in every corner of his life, in the quiet patches of sunlight, tea on the floor, in the stray paw prints he sometimes noticed on freshly cleaned surfaces, in the soft memories of nights spent huddled together in the warmth of his jacket. The mother cat often returned to the shelter, her protective instincts intact. Sometimes she brought new kittens, strays born into the unforgiving streets, unsure of their place in the world, and the shelter was always ready. Mrs. Alder, the stern neighbor who had once laughed at a tiny kitten, had become an unexpected ally. She helped Ethan keep the shelter stocked, bringing food, blankets, and even old toys. Occasionally she would sit on the edge of the shelter with the cats climbing over her, and Ethan would watch, smiling quietly. The sound of her laughter, now common, echoed lightly through the alley, a gentle reminder that compassion could blossom in the most unlikely places. Ethan had changed too. The heavy, constant loneliness that had followed him like a shadow seemed to lift gradually, replaced by a quiet sense of purpose. Caring for the mother cat and her kittens had taught him patience, gentleness, and the kind of love that didn't demand anything in return. He spent his mornings filling the shelter's food bowls, his evenings watching the mother cat guide her young ones safely into the night. Each interaction strengthened a bond that transcended words. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the alley in streaks of orange and pink, Ethan stood beside the shelter, the mother cat curled comfortably inside. He noticed a small kitten cautiously emerging from the shadows, its fur still dusty, eyes wary. He knelt down, extending a hand, and the kitten approached slow. "Why?" It stopped just short, sniffing his fingers, then hesitated. The mother cat stepped forward, nudging the tiny kitten gently toward him. Ethan smiled. "You're safe," he whispered. "I promise." The kitten shivered slightly, then pressed against his palm. It was a simple, small act, but for Ethan, it felt monumental. It symbolized the circle that had begun with rejection, despair, and fear, and had grown into safety, care, and love. He realized that the alley, once a place of hopelessness, had become a haven, a sanctuary not just for animals but for anyone willing to open their heart. The mother cat watched from her shelter, calm and dignified, her eyes reflecting gratitude and wisdom. The kittens had grown, the neighborhood had softened, and even Ethan felt lighter. He had learned that sometimes love finds you in the form of tiny, trembling lives pressed against your chest, and that saving others could, in turn, save yourself. The alley remained quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the street lamp, but it was no longer empty. The shelter stood as a testament to care, resilience, and hope. Mothers and kittens, old neighbors and new friends came and went, each leaving a trace of warmth. And Ethan, standing in the fading light, knew that the family someone had once thrown away had quietly, irrevocably saved him too. In that moment he understood that life had a strange way of coming full circle. What had begun in rejection had ended in love. What had started with fear had blossomed into trust, and what had seemed like an ending was, in truth, only the beginning.